Calling to order the Committee on Labor and Tourism. Today is Tuesday, February 8th. It's 9:30 a.m. We're in conference room 312 and via video conference. Vice Chair, you can go over the rules.
In order to allow as many people to testify, there is a 3-minute time limit for testimony. Please keep yourselves muted and your video off until it is your turn to testify. If you are having technical difficulties, please use the chat function to contact our technical staff. However, if you are disconnected, please rejoin and we will resume your testimony if time permits. Please refrain from profanity or any uncivil language, as this behavior would be grounds for removal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Okay, first bill up on the agenda is HB 1785 relating to tourism governance. Requires the Legislative Reference Bureau to conduct a study that identifies and analyzes alternative tourism governance system. Requires the study to include a solicitation of input from certain stakeholder groups. Requires a final report to be submitted to the legislature prior to the convening of the regular session of 2025 and appropriates money. First up to testify. Oh. Nobody here? Oh, fantastic. Is nobody here? Okay. Okay, the only person that's said they're here to testify is Frank Haas. Frank?
Aloha, Chair Onishi and Vice Chair Sayama and committee members. My name is Frank Haas, and I'm testifying today in strong support of HB 1785, and I'm testifying as a private citizen. And though I'm speaking as a private citizen, I've been closely involved with tourism issues over many years, previously serving as Director of Marketing for the Hawaii Tourism Authority. I've been a consultant and a contributor to 3 of the HTA strategic plans. I've been an instructor and administrator of the University of Hawaii School of Travel Industry Management and Kapi'olani Community College's hospitality programs. And I've been a consultant on tourism programs internationally. And I've been an author of papers and a contributor to publications on sustainable and what's been called smart tourism. First of all, my support of this bill should not be construed in any way as an indictment of the Hawaii Tourism Authority. The most recent 5-year strategic plan, which I worked on with other contractors, was adopted in the year 2020, and it clearly calls for rebalancing the activities of the agency and its resources to increase its focus on destination management. The destination management plans, which came out of that strategic plan, have used community input to identify specific issues to be addressed on each island. So those are all good steps. Instead, my support for this bill is based on my assessment that to truly address the challenges of tourism and to make it sustainable and regenerative over time requires us to consider how to create the best structure and governance for Hawaii tourism. The issue that we have is that tourism is by its nature complex. It involves the public sector and private sector. Administration of tourism crosses jurisdictional boundaries between federal, state, and county agencies. Communities are certainly directly impacted by tourism activity, and it is now and for the foreseeable future a major contributor to Hawaii's economy. We also know that funding is required to manage tourism, to mitigate its impacts, and to create a global brand that attracts our preferred visitors. As a result of all this complexity, to effectively manage tourism requires, as the bill proposes, a governance system that enables coordination across these agencies, jurisdictions, and stakeholders, and provides long-term planning, impact mitigation, and effective marketing. We have not been alone in facing the challenges of what's been called over-tourism, and many other destinations are far more advanced than we are in developing new organizational structures to deal with tourism's complexity. Some of those are noted in the proposed bill, but in my own experience, I've seen creativity in many other destinations in reassessing their governance structure in response to over-tourism and to better manage destinations. It's just some examples. Yes?
We do have your written testimony.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than reading your entire testimony, can you sort of summarize your thoughts
Okay, a very quick summary is that I think the bill is a necessary addition to all the steps that are currently being taken to transform tourism. I think the missing element has been effective governance. There have been many initiatives over the years that have had good intentions, but have fallen short. And the reason they have fallen short is because of the lack of a governance model that can effectively see them through. And around the world, there are very good examples of other destinations addressing those organizational and systemic problems.
Okay, thank you, Frank. On this measure, we also have Department of Budget and Finance, Craig Hirai, Director, with comments. Legislative Reference Bureau, Charlotte Carter Yamaguchi, Director, with comments. State Procurement Office, Bonnie Kahakui, Acting Administrator. Opposed. Hawaii Tourism Authority, John DeFries in support. And Colin B. Moore, Public Policy Center of UH Manoa in support. Members, does anybody have any questions for Frank? Since he's the only one here. Okay, if not, let's move on to the next bill. The next bill is House Bill 2159, relating to workforce development boards, amends the Workforce Development Board law to be consistent with the General Appropriations Act of 2021, Act 88, Session Laws of Hawaii 2021. First up to testify is Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, Ann Pereira Estacio, Director.
Good morning, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the House Committee on Labor and Tourism. I want to thank the chair this morning for hearing this admin bill. The department stands on its written testimony in strong support of this bill and concurs with the amendments by the Hawaii State Ethics Commission. And I'm here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Next up, Hawaii State Ethics Commission, Robert B. Harris, Executive Director.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair. My name is Robert Harris. I'm testifying on behalf of the State Ethics Commission. We'll stand on our written testimony. You have our proposed amendment. Happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you. Mahalo.
Thank you, Robert. Next up, Workforce Development Council, Alan Hayashi. Hayashi, Chairman. Alan? Oh, not here? Okay. Members, that's all the testimony we have. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, seeing that there are none, let's move on to the next bill, which is HB 1786, relating to workforce development boards. Renames the Workforce Development Council the Workforce Development Board, requires the State Workforce Development Board and local workforce development boards to develop conflict of interest policies, amends the composition and powers of the board effective July 1st, 2023. First up, we have Robert Harris, Hawaii State Ethics Commission.
Aloha, Chair Robert Harris on behalf of the State Ethics Commission. Again, we'll stand on a written testimony similar to the past bill with some minor word changes just based on how the bill is drafted. Available for any questions you might have. Mahalo.
Thank you, Robert. Next up, Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, Ann Pereira Estacio, Director.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Ann Eustachio, Director, Department of Labor. We support the intent of this measure and we offer comments, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. And Workforce Development Council, Alan Hayashi. Okay. Members, that's all the testimony we have. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, if not, let's move on to the next bill, It's HB 2102 relating to the Hawaii Employer Union Health Benefits Trust Fund, Medicare Part B premium reimbursement. It amends section 87A-23 Hawaii Revised Statutes to exclude Medicare income-related monthly adjustment amount reimbursements by the state and counties for retired employees hired after June 30th, 2022, and their spouses. First up to testify is Derek Mizuno, Hawaii Employer Union Health Benefits Trust Fund.
Hi, good morning, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, members of the committee. EUTF stands on its written testimony in strong support of this bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Derek. We also have testimony from HTA Director Randy Pereira with comments. Members, that's all the testimony we have on this bill. Are there any questions? Okay. If not, let's move on to the next measure. It's HB 2103 relating to the Hawaii Employer Union Health Benefits Trust Fund spousal Medicare Part B premium reimbursement. It amends section 87A-23 Hawaii Revised Statutes to exclude Medicare reimbursement by the state and counties for the spouse of retired employees hired after June 30th, 2022. Okay, first up to testify is Hawaii Employers Union Health Benefits Trust Fund, Derek Mizuno.
EUTF stands on its written testimony in strong support. Thank you.
We also have testimony from the Hawaii Government Employees Association, Randy Pereira, with comments. Members, that's all the testimony that we have. Do you have any questions? Yes, Representative Bellotti.
Thank you, Chair Onishi. This is an unfair question to ask of Mr. Mizuno, but I'm going to ask since you're the only agency representative here. I understand the purposes of both of these bills, the one previous and to this one, but if you could convey to the administration, I think the testimony provided by HGEA, that they understand why we're doing these for fiscal purposes, but their call for policymakers to take a holistic approach so that we can ensure that there's perhaps workplace flexibility or competitive salaries to offset these fiscal measures, I think is a very important policy call that we're concerned with, especially for workplace flexibility. Again, Mr. Mizuno, I know that you can't comment on this. This really is maybe a budget and finance or a DHERD issue, but I think we need to communicate to the administration that if we want to attract high quality government employees, while we're seeing people retiring from public employment in huge numbers, and we're seeing a workforce shortage in public employees, that we need to consider this other piece of it. So I just want to ask Mr. Mizuno if you could pass that message along, but also if you might comment if there's been any discussions with EUTF or ERS with respect to the other things that the employer might be able to do.
I can communicate those concerns to the Director of Finance as well as the DHERD Director. In terms of looking at it holistically, I really can't comment. I think one thing that's been good that DHERD has done has been the telework policy that it's actually been in place for 10, 11 years, where we found that to be helpful for our staff. We found that teleworking has worked, and 16 out of our 60 employees have been approved under that DHERD telework policy. So even post-pandemic, they'll be able to continue teleworking. So I think that is a benefit in terms of the flexibility. But beyond that, I really can't comment, but we'll communicate those concerns to them.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any further questions? Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next bill, HB 2104, relating to the Hawaii Employee Union Health Benefit Trust Fund investments. It exempts the Hawaii Employee Union Health Benefits Trust Fund from disclosing under Chapter 92F, Hawaii Revised Statutes, certain types of alternative investment fund information. First up to testify is Hawaii Employee Union Health Benefits Trust Fund, Derek Mizuno, Administrator.
EETF stands on its written testimony in strong support. Thank you.
Okay. Members, that's the only person that indicated they'll be here to testify. But we do have testimony from the Office of Information Practices, Cheryl Kakazu Park, Director, with comments. And United Here Local 5, Benjamin Sadowski, in opposition. Members, are there any questions? Okay, if not, let's move on to the next bill. That's HB 2105, relating to the Employees Retirement System Disability Retirement. Clarifies the Employees Retirement System's eligibility requirement definition for service-connected disability and accidental death benefits. First up to testify is Employee Retirement System, Thomas Williams, Executive Director. Mr. Williams.
Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, members of the committee. 1 second, do you have me on? Okay, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, members of the committee. I'm Tom Williams, the Executive Director of the Employees Retirement System. And I really appreciate the opportunity this morning to testify in support of House Bill 2105. I would just like to remind the committee that this bill is virtually identical to House Bill 931, which actually was heard by the House Committee on Labor and Tourism last year, as well as the House Finance Committee, was crossed over to the Senate, but was not heard, I'd say, as a result of a logjam at the end of last year's session. Our Board of Trustees strongly supports this measure. The ERS largely stands on its written testimony, but we do have a request for a couple of revisions. We asked the committee to make the following revisions. The ERS believes that 2 of the proposed new subsections B should be switched, in fact. The resulting placement would be more appropriate in our estimation. First, new subsection B on page 10, line 4 through page 11, line 2. This should be added to section 88-82 on page 14 instead, since section 88-82 relates to contested hearings. New subsection B, second, on page 14, lines 1 through 18. This should be added to section 88-79 on page 10 instead. This will be consistent with the bill's proposed amendments to section 88-55.5 and 88-336. We really appreciate your time. We ask your favorable consideration of our bill, and I'm available to respond to any questions.
Okay, thank you. Members, this is the only testifier. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, see none. Let's move on to the next bill, HB 1760, relating to Immigrant Resource Centers, appropriates monies to the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, Office of Community Services to restore funding for the Immigrant Resource Centers. First up to testify is Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, Ann Pereira Estacio, Director.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Ann Eustachio, Director, Department of Labor. The department stands on its written testimony and support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Hawaii Office of Community Services, Giovanni D. De La Cruz, Executive Director.
Good morning, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the House Committee on Labor and Tourism. The Office of Community Services stand in its written testimony in strong support of this measure. I would just like to add, Chair, that the Office of Community Services stand ready should the legislature decide to fund this very important program to one of the core constituency that we serve in our office. And I'm ready for any questions that you might have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next up, Hawaii Coalition for Immigrant Rights, Lisa Ryan Gill, co-chair.
Aloha Chair Onishi and Vice Chair Sayama, Liza Ryan Gill, a co-coordinator of the Hawaii Coalition for Immigrant Rights. And we represent more than 25 immigrant serving or immigrant-led organizations across Hawaii. And we're standing in strong support of HB 1760. And just a couple of things to point out, though we've included a lot of good facts in our testimony, is that these types of offices are present in a number of different states, including Massachusetts, California, Illinois, New York, and dozens of cities. In fact, I was speaking this morning with a staff member from the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement in Boston that just expanded by $1 million to 11 staff just for their city office working on immigrant advancement. Hawaii has one of the largest populations of foreign-born people, and as we saw during COVID-19 with the disproportionate impact of COVID on Pacific Islander communities, and especially the 1 in 9 Hawaii residents that are limited English proficient, we need to do more to support our communities that come from across Pacific nations and across the world that make and serve Hawaii disproportionately in low-income jobs, specifically in the hotel industry, making up more than 40% of our agricultural workers. These folks often do not have access to the information that they need about their rights and can therefore be subject to human trafficking and or wage theft. The more that we support and expand this office and just even restore it to the funding that it had back in 2014 to 2017, we can make sure that all of our community is safe and has the ability to be productive. As we saw, when something like COVID hits just one part of our population, it impacts all of us. So we encourage this committee to pass this forward and look forward to working with the Office of Community Service to expand and restore these services. Mahalo.
Thank you. Next up, we have Hawaii Friends of Civil Rights, Amy Agbayani, co-chair.
Thank you, Chair Onishi and Vice Chair Sayama for hearing this very important bill. Hawaii Friends of Civil Rights strongly supports the bill, and we stand on our written testimony. I just want to also note that this is one of the bills of the Filipino caucus, and that nearly half of all the immigrants to Hawaii, 46% are from the Philippines, and the next highest group is from Japan, 8%, China, 8%, Korea, 7%, Micronesia, 5%, Vietnam, 4%, Mexico, 2%, and Canada, 1.5%. So the Filipino caucus, and also most of these immigrants are, 57% of the immigrants are naturalized US citizens, and many have US born citizens. It's a significant group from many countries, and they do need services, and they make significant contributions if they are given some assistance. So thank you very much for hearing the bill, and we hope you pass it. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, we also have testimony from people who said they're not going to be here. We have Department of Budget and Finance, Craig T. Rai, Director, with comments. Hawaii Coalition for Immigrant Rights, Catherine Chen, co-chair, in support. The Legal Clinic, Corey Park, President, in support. Common Cause Hawaii, Sandy Ma, Executive Director, with comments. Thaddeus Nam, individual in support. Gerard Silva, individual in opposition. And the Health Committee of the Democratic Party of Hawaii, Melody Aduha, Chair in support. Members, that's all the testifiers. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing that there's none, let's go on to the last bill. It's relating to the workers' compensation law. It amends the title of Chapter 386, Part 5, Subpart C, Hawaii Revised Statute to add reserve public safety law enforcement officers and amend Section 386-181 HRS to include reserve public safety law enforcement officers to the list of volunteer occupations covered under the workers' compensation law, allows reserve public safety law enforcement officers who are injured under the conditions specified in Section 386-3 HRS to receive workers' compensation, adds reserve public safety enforcement officers to the list of volunteers who are covered under the conditions of computing average weekly wages. Members, first up to testify is Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, Ann Pereira Estacio, Director.
Good morning, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the House Committee on Labor and Tourism. The department stands on its written testimony and support. Thank you.
Thank you. Hawaii Department of Public Safety, Max Otani, Director.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. This is Jordan Lowe, Deputy Director for Law Enforcement for Max Otani. We stand by our written testimony in support of House Bill 2174. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, that's all the testifiers we have. Are there any questions? Okay, if not, we're going to recess for decision making. We're reconvening the hearing on Committee of Labor and Tourism for decision-making. The first bill, HB 1785. We will be passing this bill out with a effective date of December 25th, 2040, and would like to add in the committee report to reflect that we recommend an appropriation amount of $500,000 for the study. Members, this is a study that's going to span 2 years, so it's not going to be something we'll get right away. Members, are there any questions? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 1785 with amendments. Chair, Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Bellotti.
Aye.
Representative Holt.
Aye.
Representative Kobayashi.
Aye.
Representative Quinlan.
Aye.
Representative Takayama.
Aye.
Representative Okimoto.
Aye.
Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. Okay, the next bill, HB 2159. We'll be making the following amendments. We're going to be consolidating language from Section 1 of HB 1786 into Section 3 of HB 2159 relating to board composition, appointment, and tenure to allow for the membership of the board to be reduced while adhering to federal requirements. We're also going to be taking the suggested amendments by DLIR regarding the governor's appointment of the chairperson. We'll be adopting the suggested amendments by the State Ethics Commission regarding the conflict of interest provision. On page 5, line 6, we'll be taking out the term governor and changing it to the Director of Labor and Industrial Relations. On page 2, line 2, we'll be adding in or the governor's designee after the word governor. There are also several conforming amendments that need to be made to accommodate the fact that the Workforce Development Council is being renamed to the Workforce Development Board. Therefore, we'll be making the necessary conforming amendments as needed to reflect those changes. And we're defecting the date to December 25th, 2040. Members, any questions? Okay, if not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Okay, voting on HB 2159, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the previous attendance. Any members voting no? Any members voting with reservations? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, the next bill, HB 1786. Since we're putting the section regarding the board composition into 2159, we're going to be deferring this bill. The next bill, HB 2102, we're going to be putting in an effective date of December 25th, 2040 to move this bill along. Members, questions? Okay, if not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 2102, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the previous attendance. Any members voting no? Any members?
Kobayashi votes no.
Okay, Representative Kobayashi for no vote. Any members voting with reservations? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Next bill, HB 2103. We'll be making the following amendments. On page 3, line 13, we're going to delete the term employee beneficiary spouse and insert spouse of an employee beneficiary hired prior to July 1st, 2022. We're making other technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style, and inserting a effective date of December 25th, 2040. Members, any questions? Yes, Representative Kobayashi.
So my comments are really the same for both 2102 and 2103, that it's just really a continuation of death by 1,000 cuts for benefits for government employees. As a result, I'm no vote on 2103 as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Representative Quinlan. Oh. I see a hand. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, if no further questions, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 2103, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Noting Representative Kobayashi's no vote. Anyone, other members voting no? Any members voting with reservations? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. Okay, next bill, HB 2104. We're passing this bill out with a effective date of December 25th, 2040 to encourage further discussion. Members, questions? Yes, Representative Kobayashi.
So last year we heard this bill, I commented extensively on it. It's really just beyond the pale for us to want to exempt alternative investments from transparency and disclosure for the ERS system. The reasons given that because of the, I assume it's the same as last year, but because of the nature of the high performance of the ERS fund, that the other funds of America are waiting with bated breath to see what they're doing so they can replicate it, which really doesn't hold water for this one type of investment, but particularly for alternative fund investments. The desire to forego any transparency and disclosure on this is really not a good thing for government or for the people who have their money in the ERS investments. As a result, I'm a no vote on this again.
Okay, Representative, just for clarification, this is for the EUTF. Last year, we already.
Same one, yeah. So it's the same idea, right? So
right.
That's why I said, so for the EUTF, right?
Right, EUTF.
Yeah, so I'm saying last year was ERS, this year is EUTF, and it's the same reason. It's the same reason to oppose any lack of transparency on it. So I don't see why it would make a difference. I mean, this one's for the EUTF. Last year's was ERS.
It's two different funds that are covered by staff.
Yeah, but it's the same principle.
Well, I understand.
So, and that's why I'm a no vote on this. And I which is my prerogative.
That's fine. I just wanted to
Give you a no vote.
Because you said
it's my prerogative.
Yeah, okay. Members, any further comments or questions? Okay, if not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 2104, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Noting the no vote from Representative Kobayashi. Any other members voting no? Any members voting with reservations? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, on the next bill, HB 2105, we'll be taking the requested revisions by ERS and effective date to 2025-2040. Members, any questions? Okay, if not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 2105, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Noting the previous attendance, any members voting no? Any members voting with reservations? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, members. Next bill, HB 1760, will be adding language to require an outreach component to these resource centers, as well as making the amendment in the committee report or making a recommendation in the committee report for $1 million appropriation. We'll also be inserting an effective date of December 25th, 2040. Members, any questions?
Just a brief comment, Chair.
Yes.
In support of the Filipino community, I'll be voting mabuhay on this measure.
Thank you, Representative. Any further questions or comments? Okay, members, if not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 1760, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Knowing the previous attendance, any members voting no? Any members voting with reservations? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. And the final bill, HB 2174, will be inserting a effective date of December 25th, 2040 to continue conversation on this bill. Members, any questions? Okay, if not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 2174, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Knowing the previous attendance, any members voting no? Any members voting with reservations? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, Thank you, members. Just to let you know, Thursday, we do have a hearing. We're going to be moving all of the public sector funding bills out of committee. Should be relatively quick, but there are a lot of bills. So just to let you know. Okay, thank you, members. This meeting's adjourned.